Mike, I'm excited to hear about the milestone program for Bible Answer. I was fortunate enough to be on the 500th episode of a Bible Answer, so I guess I'm just always on the round numbers for some reason. Maybe it's because I'm so round, I don't know. But it's great to be here this afternoon. It's not afternoon yet, it's morning, isn't it? So many people in this room that I love so much and don't get to see as often now as I would love to. And so it's just great to be here today and to have this opportunity to lead this study this morning. I graduated in 2001. It's hard to believe 20 years have already gone by. Since that time here, my life continues to be blessed every day by the time that I was here. It's amazing how fast 20 years can go by, isn't it? About 13 years ago, it was a Saturday morning, and my daughter Sarah had a early soccer game, maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. I just got out of bed on the wrong side and was just in a general sour mood. I have to get up so early on my day off, and I think my son Jacob had a football game somewhere later that day, so my whole day off was going to be taken up with all these ball games. And so we stopped in town there to get some breakfast and get some gas, and standing in line paying, this fella comes up behind us and he sees Sarah in her soccer uniform. He says, "Oh, it looks like you have a soccer game today." And I'm just Mr. Bad News Bear. "Oh, yeah, I can't believe I had to get up so early on my day off, and I got to go over here for the soccer game, and got to go over there for the football game, and my whole day is just going to be taken up with all this stuff." And I was just in a terrible, terrible mood. So later on, I'm out putting the gas into the car, and this fella, he comes walking up to me. And he says, "Sir, if you don't mind, I just feel like there's something I need to say to you." So I said, "You definitely have my attention, so go ahead." He said, "I just want to encourage you to enjoy this day." He said, "My children are grown now. They've moved away from home. My daughter, she lives far away. I only get to see her maybe twice a year if I'm lucky, and it just feels like I blinked my eyes, and just a few days ago I was having these soccer games and these football games, and now it's all over with." He said, "This is going to get away from you a lot faster than you think. So please just enjoy this day." And I'll tell you, that stranger gave me some of the best advice that anybody's ever given me in my life. And since that time, I've thought about it often, how fleeting life is and how it gets away from us. I can't believe I'm standing here saying it's 20 years ago that I graduated from the Memphis School of Preaching. I just can't even fathom that reality, but yet here we are. And we blink our eyes again, and if we're blessed and fortunate, we'll be saying 20 more years have passed by quickly. And so we need to make the most of the moments to magnify the awesome God that we serve. One of the signature themes in the Bible is how God makes dreams come true for His children. However, it's rarely easy. The road between the dream and the fulfillment of the dream is often bumpy, it's often difficult, it's often painful, there's often lots of sadness along the way. But God accompanies His children every step of the way, ensuring that they are able to climb every hill, ensuring that they're able to make it through every valley and keep moving one step at a time, ahead, until the dream is fulfilled. He often steps in and reroutes history in order to make sure that His promise never fails. He cares about every struggle, about every fear, about every tear that we shed, about every hope that we have in our hearts. You know, one of God's favorite words is through. In Isaiah 43:2, the Bible says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, nor shall the flame scorch you. Through. I don't know what waters you have in your life right now. I'm sure you have some. What rivers, what floods you're facing right now. You either, as Brother Holland would often say, you're either about to go through a trial, or you're going through a trial, or you have just come out of a trial. That's just the way that life on this earth operates. So you're either about to go through the waters, or you're in the waters, or you've just come out of the waters, one or the other, and probably about to go through that cycle again. And God has promised, I am with you, and you will pass through. Down in here in the South, we like to say it this way: this too shall pass. So whatever it is that we're going through, God's promise is it will not stand in the way of the dream that He has for us. Everybody knows about how, unfortunately, last year's lectureship was delayed because of the pandemic and all of that. So it was in the latter part of 2019 when we were writing the manuscripts for this lectureship and getting those in for the book and all of that. And at that particular time in my life, we had just found out that my mom had stage 4 breast cancer. And unfortunately, the cancer was so spread by that point, she only lived about 3 more weeks from the time that we found out. And so it's amazing to me that I was writing the words that I wrote for the manuscript at that time when that I was just going through that particular flood in my life. And as I stand here, a little over a year removed from that, it is amazing to me how God has kept that promise that He made so long ago to me. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. Now, you often think they will. You often think, this is too much, I can't get through this, I can't deal with this is the end for me. But God promises they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned. You'll be affected. You'll never be the same person again, but you will not be consumed by the fire that you go through. The flame shall not scorch you. That's God's promise. And there's no better place to go to see God's ability to do that than the life of Joseph. So let's have our Bibles open to the book of Genesis. We're going to do our best to cover as much of this magnificent man's life as we can. And we want to center our thoughts on his life primarily around this theme. God made Joseph's dreams come true. No star shines as brightly on the pages of Genesis as Joseph does. I love the article that Alan wrote for House to House where he described this section of the Bible as 13 chapters with no sin, or something along that line. And we're certainly not advocating that Joseph never sinned, but even the Bible tells the story of Noah's sin and Abraham's sin and so many others, and not Joseph. So what a man of great character he was in every possible way. And God certainly was magnified by the life that Joseph lived. Having just heard Dan's lesson in the auditorium about Job, it kept striking me how wonderful these two stories are companions of each other. Of Job and all of the trial that he went through in his life, and yet he continued to believe, he continued to trust, he continued to hold on to God. And the story of Joseph is very much the same thing. Life kept kicking him down, and he kept getting back up. He kept pushing forward, and he refused to give up on his dream. You have dreams. You have dreams for your ministry. Those of you who work in the church, you have dreams for your marriage. You have dreams for your children. You have dreams for other spiritual areas of your life. And ultimately, the dream that we all have is to live eternally with God when this life is over. I love that story that I've often heard told about Brother Keeble. And he'd gone to bed one night and he's just laughing hysterically. And his wife asked him if everything was okay. And he said, "Oh, yes, I was just dreaming about heaven." Dreaming about heaven. Sometimes that dream, in life's hardest moments, that dream feels like so far away. But Joseph's life displays how God can use all of the experiences that we go through in life to make those dreams come true. So, early on in Joseph's life, in Genesis 37, verses 1 through 11, the Bible tells us about these dreams that Joseph had. He has a dream, and he and his brothers are binding sheaves, and then the sheaves that are bound by his brothers begin to bow down to Joseph's sheaves. And then he has another dream, and in this dream, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars, they're all bowing down to him as well. And he reveals these dreams to his family. His family is very troubled by them. What does this mean? Well, even Joseph doesn't really know what it means. He knows that there's something special about these dreams. These dreams are not just ordinary dreams. These are dreams in which God is revealing something that's going to happen in Joseph's life. They are revealing some significance of a role that Joseph will play in what God is working out in the world. And even Joseph doesn't know how far out into the future this is going to happen. He doesn't know where it's going to happen or when or how. There's a lot of the specifics that are not revealed, but he knows that he will play some special role to his parents and to his brothers in the working out of God's plan. And that must have been very exciting for Joseph. He must have been eagerly anticipating the future to see how this would all unfold and to see how God would use him. But it's going to be one long, dark night. One long, dark valley before he finally sees those dreams fulfilled. It starts with these brothers. Now, I have 2 older brothers, so I know what it's like to have brothers. I know what it's like to have older brothers. And I know how they can torture you. All right? And I'm getting a very hearty amen from the 3rd row over here right now. Brothers like to pick on each other, and that's sort of par for the course, but pardon the golf reference, Rick. But this went a little deeper than that. These brothers, they despised the fact that Jacob showed some favoritism toward Joseph. They hated his coat of many colors. They hated his dreams. And they made every day as miserable as they could make it for Joseph. Oh, they didn't just pick on him. They taunted him and they tortured him. And they looked for every way they could inflict harm on him. You know, that can do a lot of damage to a person. It can severely damage the way they look at themselves. It can severely damage their outlook on life. And I think this must have been a painfully difficult time for Joseph. As he's a young man growing up and he's sorting out who he is and he's sorting out what he believes, he has these brothers that are just sort of dampening everything. And that could have a way of wreaking havoc on a person's confidence. It's amazing that Joseph came out of that with any sense of strength and courage about him, but he did. And at a turning point in his life, his brothers found an opportunity to execute the most painful abuse. Jacob had sent Joseph out to see about those brothers. I mean, they were the kind of boys that you had to keep a constant eye on. And as they see Joseph coming, they said, here comes the dreamer. And at first they talk about killing him, but eventually Reuben convinces them, let's don't do that, let's just throw him in this pit. And so they decide that they would do that, and they said, and then we will see what will come of his dreams. You know, it's difficult when you have dreams and the people that are closest to you seem like all they want to do is destroy them. But you know, that happens in life, doesn't it? We think about all of the great things that God intends for us. But yet, so often, either at home or in the workplace or in the classroom or whatever our sphere of life is, day after day we encounter people that seem like all they want to do is ruin those dreams. That's what Joseph's brothers wanted to do. Let's throw him in this pit. Let's sell him into slavery. And then we'll see what comes of those dreams. Then we'll see how much he brags about us bowing down to him and all of that. And so they threw him in that pit and they sat down to eat lunch. And in the bottom of that pit, Joseph is crying and he is calling out. He is begging for mercy. I won't tell Dad, please pull me out of here. Just please. He begs and begs and begs for mercy. Can you, if you will, for a moment, put yourself in Joseph's shoes? Put yourself at the bottom, looking up through the opening of that pit. God, how is this consistent with the dream you gave me? The dream wasn't for me to be in a pit looking up at my brothers. The dream was about my brothers bowing down to me, to recognizing me. My dream was about the sun, moon, and stars bowing down and recognizing me. And instead, I'm being treated like an animal down here. Life at the bottom of a pit is miserable. If you've been at the bottom of one, you know. In the bottom of that pit, you often wonder, God, how can this possibly be what you intend for me? How could this possibly be part of your plan? But there is one blessing about being in a pit. And that is that in the bottom of a pit, you have nowhere to look but up. And that's exactly what Joseph did. So they pulled him out of that pit, but not to rescue him. Instead, as the Ishmaelites pass by, they see their opportunity to make some money, and so they intend to sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites who are going down to Egypt. Can you imagine what it would have been like for Joseph? I mean, he'd always been the number one son for Jacob. He always had the most honorable place to sit. He had the best room, he had the best clothes. He was always treated as number one. And then he's pulled out of that pit, and the Ishmaelites look over him like he's a donkey or a mule. I mean, they intend to use him for work, and that's their only interest in him. How drastic the transformation is from how he would have been treated by his father to now how he's going to be treated by these Ishmaelites. To hear the brothers bartering back and forth over the price. By the way, these are the great-grandsons of Abraham doing this. It's hard to believe, isn't it? Sounds like your typical dysfunctional family, doesn't it? But, even God's families have their share of problems from time to time. So Joseph is sold to the Ishmaelites. Eventually, they sell him to a man named Potiphar. Now, what should a man do in Joseph's position? He doesn't deserve to be a slave. He was born into a noble family. He deserves a seat at the head table, not to be among the slaves. He doesn't deserve this. It's not fair. But you know what? In this moment in time, does he have any control over what's happening? So often in life, we find ourselves in situations, don't we? And what we feel like we're going through, we feel like it's not fair that I should have to deal with this. It's not fair that this should be the life that I'm having to live. But we have no control over many of the circumstances in which we find ourselves. So what do? I'll tell you what Joseph did. Even though he's in a bad situation, by faith, he made the best of it. That's all anybody can do. Talking about my mother, when she was pregnant with me, my dad had a car accident that left him permanently disabled. So in a moment, my mom had to become breadwinner. She had to become mom. She, in some cases, had to become dad and wear all of these hats and roles. It was a bad situation. Not the situation that she probably expected when she was 18 years old and she and my dad and the preacher standing at my grandmother's house promised in sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer, till death do we part. It was probably not the first thing on her mind that day when she made that vow. But there she was at 30 years old. A baby on the way, 2 sons to take care of. And she did. She made the best of a bad situation. Now, I've often asked her how she did that. And her response always, this was kind of her take on 1 Corinthians 10:13. She would say, well, the Lord just won't put on you any more than you can handle. And sometimes you just do what you have to do. In my lowest points, those words come back to me. And when I need just a little bit more motivation to go forward and take the next step, I think about those words. You just do what you have to do. And when Joseph became Potiphar's slave, that's what he did. He did what he had to do. He made the best of a bad situation, and because of that, he was promoted. Potiphar could see how he was being blessed because Joseph was with him, and he began to recognize that. But unfortunately, this also caused him to catch the eye of Potiphar's wife. And she sees how handsome he is, how talented he is, how desirable and attractive. And she begins to fantasize about him. Every day she picks her outfit, to try to find something that would be maybe enticing to him. Every time she's around him, she talks in a way, she tries to seduce him. He has become a trophy to her, and her only intent is to commit sin with him, to commit sexual sin. And every day Joseph is exhausted with attempts to try to avoid her or to try to shield off all of these temptations that she is throwing his way. And then eventually, as you know, she catches him one day alone and she lays hold of him. Potiphar will never know, Joseph, just one time. Just give me that one moment together. Joseph doesn't even stick around to hear what she has to say. He leaves his coat in her hands and he runs away. Now, what happens next is that Potiphar's wife, being offended by Joseph's rejection, she comes up with this story. She tells Potiphar of how Joseph had taken advantage of her, which of course was absolutely false. But Potiphar has to take her side, and so he has Joseph thrown into prison. Now, let's hit the pause button for a second. Joseph might have been inclined to ask at this point in time, God, I don't remember this as being part of the dreams. The dream was about these brothers bowing down to me. The dream was about the sun, moon, and stars bowing down to me. How is becoming a slave a part of that? Becoming a slave is going down, not going up. And somehow in becoming a slave, Joseph finds the moral fortitude to pick himself up off the ground and press forward. And his reward for doing so is only to be accused of being a rapist and to be sent away to be imprisoned because of that. So he picked himself up only for life to throw him back down again. And one would expect this to be the final straw. This is the point where the dream will die, surely. Surely Joseph can't pick himself back up again. But somehow, through faith, he finds the strength and the courage to make the best of a bad situation. You just do what you have to do. So he becomes the best prisoner that he can be. The keeper of the prison soon recognizes his quality, promotes him and elevates him. And then one day, two very special prisoners come into the prison. Pharaoh's own butler and baker. And Joseph's in charge of taking care of them. This is kind of a, just sort of it seemed like maybe a smaller point, but to me it says a great deal about Joseph's character. One day this butler and the baker, they wake up, they've been troubled by these dreams that they have, and Joseph asks them, "Why are you so sad today?" Now I know that's just a common question, but sometimes if people have been through as much as Joseph has been through, there's a tendency there to become very self-absorbed and very bitter by it, to the point that you could really care less about what's going on for anybody else or how well they're doing. It's all about how badly you're doing. And it amazes me that hasn't soured Joseph's heart, so that he's still compassionate. And he asks them, "Why are you so sad today?" Well, they both had dreams. The baker had dreams about these baskets of bread over his head and the birds coming to eat that bread. And the butler had dreams about a vine with 3 branches, and he squeezed the grapes into Pharaoh's cup. And Joseph revealed that God will give the answer, the explanation of those dreams. And it was good news for the butler and not so good news for the baker. Within 3 days, the baker would be hanged, and he would become a meal for the birds, unfortunately. Cue those reminders of Alfred Hitchcock's movie. But the butler, fortunately, would be restored to Pharaoh's good graces. And at this point, Joseph begs the butler, "You're going to have a chance to talk to Pharaoh. Please tell him my story. Please explain to him that I'm here and I don't deserve to be here. Please tell him what's going on with me. This is my way out." In that moment, Joseph must have thought, now we're beginning to see the dream come true. This has got to be it. God has arranged this so that now I can get out of here and I can get on to the business of what He intends for me. And so you can just imagine when that butler left the prison the next day, Joseph, he must have just been looking, like people when they're expecting a package coming from Amazon. Looking out the window just every few minutes. Is it here yet? Is it here? He expected at any moment someone was coming from Pharaoh's court to get him out of there. But then one day passed, and another day passed, and a week passed, and a month passed, and 2 long years passed, and nothing happened. But then Pharaoh had a dream about 7 fat cows and 7 skinny cows and 7 plump sheaves of grain and 7 that were skinny and puny. And then the butler remembers, oh yeah, there was a fella, and I promised him that I would put in a good word for him. And so Joseph is brought before Pharaoh. And Joseph interprets the dream. There will be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine, and the famine will be much more intense than the years of plenty. And Joseph has a plan. You need to set aside a fifth in those years of plenty to sustain you through the years of famine. Amazing how this man, he was a slave and then a prisoner, and now he's advising the most powerful man in all of the world at that time. My God's ability to reverse situations. So, to make a long story short, the 7 years of plenty come, and then the famine. And then the famine begins to affect where Jacob and his 11 sons who are left live. And their food runs out. And the only solution is to send someone to Egypt to find food. And there's Joseph. One day, as he is rationing out the food to various people, in walk these 11 men. Well, 10, I should say. Benjamin was left behind. And he recognizes them instantly, but they don't recognize him because he probably looks nothing like he did when they last saw him. He looks more like an Egyptian now, and he speaks the language. And they come in to ask for food, and when they do, what do? They bow down. There it is. He's wide awake, and the dream is happening right in front of him. And now it's clear why he had those dreams. You see, if he had not been in Egypt, there's a very good chance his brothers would have starved to death in the famine. And that would have affected not only the well-being of his family, but you got to keep in mind that God had made a promise to Abraham that through his descendants, the Savior is going to come into the world. So if that family dies out, it's not just the end of that family. It's the end of the scheme of redemption. And that can't happen. Joseph's dream was about his role in enduring years of hardship in Egypt just so that he would be at the right place at the right time to continue God's plans in this world. And there it was unfolding in front of him. Joseph had 2 sons born to him while he was in Egypt. It's amazing to me the names that he gave to them. The firstborn was named Manasseh, which means forgetting. And he said he gave him that name because God had caused him to forget all the toil of his life and what had happened in his father's house. And the second he named Ephraim, which means fruitful. And he named him that because God had caused Joseph to be fruitful in the land of affliction. Okay. Every rose has thorns. And every life has its share of prosperity and suffering. You know, the old proverbial saying about the glass, is it half full or is it half empty? Well, it's both. But it's all about what you choose to focus on. You can go through life pitying yourself about the problems, or you can go through life counting the blessings. And when Joseph was naming his sons, rather than giving names that would express the heartache and the pain and the discouragement and the disappointment that he had been through in his life, he chose names that would reflect the blessings that God had left along the way. He chose to focus on that. And with that, he magnified God. And instead of seeking revenge against his brothers, he forgave them, he fed them, he cared for them. He was able to see his father again with his own eyes and spend his last days seeing God, that dream that God had given him, fulfilled. And eventually he gave a charge that his bones would not be left in Egypt. He knew that what God had promised about the promised land was coming true. And you know why he believed it? Because in his own life he had seen God be faithful to the dreams that he had given him. And he knew If God says we're going to the promised land, that's where we're going. So don't bury my bones here. Oh, they might have built a pyramid for Joseph in Egypt if he had wanted to be left behind there. But that's not where he wanted to be. He wanted to be in the promised land. Let me leave you with this thought. I can't even imagine what heaven looks like. I won't even try to describe it. But someday we're going to have that moment like Joseph had down there in Egypt, where a dream that seemed for so long like it was hopeless, and then there it was unfolding in front of him. And can you imagine that moment when the Lord comes back, when we shall see him as he is, when the gates of heaven shall be opened unto us, and we hear him say, "Come, ye blessed, inherit the kingdom of the Lord"? In that moment, the dream that at many times seems so hopeless will be as real as this moment is here and unfold right in front of us. So, like Joseph, let's keep walking by faith, step by step. Let's keep magnifying God by our lives and trust that God will make those dreams come true. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon.